You woke up today and before you even got out of bed, you already knew exactly what was going to go wrong. The same tightness in your chest, the same fears circling around, the same conversations that only exist inside your head. You call this reality. But what your eyes see when they open isn't the now, it's the result of thoughts you had weeks, months, or years ago, only now taking form. The bill that's suffocating you, the body that feels heavy, the silence that persists, and none of this was created today. The third dimension operates on a delay. It shows you what you already thought and felt, not what you're thinking and feeling now. And while you react to this materialized past as if it were the current truth, you're programming more of the same. Your attention stays trapped in what has already ended, while another dimension, where the prosperous, healthy, and loved version of you already exists, is simply waiting for you to stop validating yesterday. The question was never about solving your problems. It was about stopping the feeding of them.
There's a fundamental error that governs how most people perceive the nature of existence. This error operates silently, like a virus installed in the mind's operating system, and its consequence is devastating. It systematically prevents the manifestation of success, health, and prosperity. The mistake lies in believing that if something isn't present in the physical world, if it can't be seen, touched, or measured, then it simply doesn't exist. This confusion between invisibility and non-existence is what separates those who transform their lives from those who remain stuck in the same cycles. Neville Goddard, in his work The Power of Awareness, identifies this mechanism directly. The senses are deceptive because they only show the materialized past. What you observe now, your bank account, your medical diagnosis, your relationship status, isn't reality under construction. It's the echo of previous states of consciousness that have finally become matter. Look at the standard behavior when facing adversity. The average person, when confronted with empty bank accounts, chronic health problems, or persistent loneliness, reacts in a predictable way. They validate the absence as the only absolute truth. They look at their bank statement and conclude they're poor. They receive an unfavorable diagnosis and assume they're sick. They find themselves alone and decree that love has been denied to them. Each of these conclusions seems perfectly logical. After all, the senses confirm the situation. But it's precisely this apparent logic that constitutes the trap. To transform your life, the first move requires you to stop feeding the gaps in your current reality with your attention. This doesn't mean denying that problems exist on the sensory level. It means understanding that by fixing your gaze on lack, you're watering what you want to eliminate. Physics and metaphysics converge on this point. The desired future isn't something you chase through linear time, but something you enter in the present moment through a shift in perception. Goddard establishes that consciousness is the only substantial reality. The physical world doesn't operate as cause, it operates as effect. It functions like a mirror that reflects, with absolute fidelity, the content of consciousness. Trying to change external circumstances by manipulating external elements is the same as trying to modify your reflection in the mirror without changing your own face. The attempt can be exhausting, but it won't work. The great challenge lies in the difficulty of focusing on prosperity while experiencing scarcity. How do you sustain the feeling of health when the body is showing symptoms? How do you inhabit wealth when the bills are piling up? The mind, through conditioning, tends to fixate on what the senses capture. This fixation isn't neutral, it actively perpetuates the unwanted state. Focusing on insecurity generates more circumstances that justify insecurity. Concentrating on pain attracts more elements that sustain the experience of pain. Overcoming this obstacle requires mental re-education. This isn't about naive optimism or superficial positive thinking. It's about understanding how reality actually operates. Whatever receives attention receives energy, and whatever receives energy expands in the field of experience. This principle works regardless of belief or disbelief, just as gravity affects both those who believe in it and those who ignore it equally. True mental alchemy happens when you withdraw focus from the apparently real problem and direct it toward the apparently invisible solution. Apparently is the key word. The problem seems real because the senses confirm it. The solution seems invisible because it hasn't materialized yet. But Goddard inverts this logic. What the senses show is the past frozen in form. What the imagination sustains is the future in gestation. Where attention goes, energy flows. Where energy flows, reality is built. This isn't a motivational formula. It's the description of a mechanism. The person who wakes up every day and, before any action, mentally reviews all their problems is inadvertently programming the continuation of those problems, not as cosmic punishment, but because attention functions like a spotlight that illuminates specific possibilities in the infinite field of potentials, and what is illuminated tends to solidify. But if the senses lie, or more precisely, if they only show obsolete truths, then what can you rely on? What reference can you use to navigate existence? The answer leads directly to the understanding that two realities operate simultaneously, and that most people know only one of them. Sensory, three-dimensional reality is just the surface layer of a much vaster structure. Another dimension exists, equally real, where all possibilities already reside in the eternal present, and it's in this dimension that true creation happens. If the senses only show obsolete truths, then what can you rely on? The answer requires expanding the map of existence beyond what the eyes can see. To transcend the limitations of the material world, the first step is to recognize that two realities operate simultaneously, and that most people live imprisoned in only one of them. The first reality is familiar. We call it the third dimension, and it corresponds to the material world detectable by the five senses. It's what you see when you open your eyes in the morning, the room, the furniture, the body reflected in the mirror. It's what you touch, smell, and hear. It's the balance in your bank account, the number on the scale, and the diagnosis on the medical exam. It's what we conventionally call real life, the set of circumstances that seem to define who you are and what's possible for you. This dimension operates under the laws of linear time. There's a past that already happened, a present that's happening, and a future that hasn't arrived yet. Cause and effect follow a sequence. To have something tomorrow, you apparently need to build it today. The second reality is less known but equally present. Neville calls it the fourth dimension. While the third dimension is the realm of solid forms, the fourth dimension is the realm of possibilities, a layer of existence that operates according to different rules, and that can be accessed right now through a faculty that every human being possesses, the imagination. In the fourth dimension, time doesn't function as a straight line. There's no past left behind or future waiting to happen. All possible versions of a life, the prosperous version, the healthy version, the fulfilled version, exist simultaneously in the eternal now. Neville states that creation is finished. Everything you could desire already exists as an available state of consciousness. The act of manifesting, therefore, doesn't consist of creating something from nothing. It consists of selecting, from among infinite possibilities that already exist, the one you want to experience, and then inhabiting it internally until it becomes your external reality. The conventional model of achievement says you first need to act in the physical world, accumulate resources, overcome obstacles, and then, if everything goes well, you'll reap the results. The sequence is do, have, be. You do the work, you have the money, and then you can be someone prosperous. Neville completely inverts this order. The correct sequence is be, have, do. You first assume the state of being prosperous in the fourth dimension. which is reflected in having the corresponding circumstances in the third dimension, and the necessary actions arise naturally as a consequence, not as a cause. But why does this second reality remain invisible to so many people? Because the senses were trained to capture only the third dimension. The eyes see forms, the ears capture sounds, touch registers textures. None of these organs was designed to perceive fields of possibility. Just as radio waves pass through the air around you at this exact moment without you seeing them, the potential realities of the fourth dimension coexist with your current experience without the physical senses detecting them. The error that paralyzes most people is using the absence of evidence in the third dimension as proof of impossibility. You look at your current life, see no signs of what you want, and conclude that this desire is unattainable or distant. But this conclusion ignores half of the map. The desired reality, whatever it may be, already exists fully in the fourth dimension as a complete pattern, waiting only for your observation and attunement to begin the materialization process. When you tune into a radio station, the other stations don't stop existing. They keep broadcasting, but you don't hear them because your device is calibrated to a specific frequency. The third dimension works in a similar way. Your current experience is the station you're tuning into through your state of consciousness. The other possibilities, including that life you desire, are transmitting simultaneously in the fourth dimension. The question isn't whether they exist. The question is whether you're going to adjust your internal tuning to pick them up. Neville teaches that the secret lies in assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This isn't about visualizing images or repeating empty affirmations. It's about inhabiting, in the imagination, the emotional state you would experience if the desire were already an accomplished fact. How would you feel waking up without debt? What would the sensation of a completely healthy body be like? What would your internal state be if the relationship you want were already part of your life? This feeling is the bridge between the two dimensions. It's the mechanism by which you select, from among all the possibilities existing in the quantum field, the one you want to bring into material experience. The difficulty, obviously, lies in sustaining the state when external circumstances are screaming the opposite. The bills keep coming, the symptoms persist, the loneliness remains palpable. In those moments, the temptation is to abandon the fourth dimension and surrender exclusively to what the senses present. But Neville warns, this surrender is precisely what perpetuates the situation. By validating only what the eyes see, you reinforce the tuning with the unwanted reality and block the reception of another frequency. If the fourth dimension is real and if everything already exists in it, then what exactly sustains the illusion of solidity in the physical world? Why does matter seem so dense, so non-negotiable, so definitive? The answer comes not from mystics, but from physics labs. And what science reveals about the nature of matter confirms, in technical language, what Neville described decades earlier. Solidity is an illusion, and the physical world is much less concrete than the senses make it seem. Modern physics dismantles the perception of solidity that sustains the common worldview. What seems irrefutably concrete, the table where you rest your arms, the floor that supports your weight, the body you inhabit, reveals itself under deeper investigation as something radically different from what it appears to be. Science confirms the premise that material reality is, to a large extent, a persistent illusion. Start with the most basic exercise. Observe any object around you. It could be the device where you're reading or listening to this. It seems solid. If you tap it with your fingers, you'll feel resistance. The senses confirm there exists dense, impenetrable matter, definitely real. Now expand this observation with the tools of physics. Put that same object under a powerful microscope, and the story begins to change. What seemed like a continuous surface reveals itself to be composed of molecules. Increase the resolution further, and the molecules show themselves to be formed by atoms. Up to this point, the image still suggests some solidity, small spheres grouped together forming larger structures, but it's at the next level of magnification that the illusion begins to crumble. The atom, which for a long time was considered the smallest indivisible unit of matter, is composed of a nucleus surrounded by electrons. And here's the data that defies all sensory experience. The distance between the nucleus and the electrons is proportionally gigantic. If the nucleus of an atom were the size of a basketball positioned at the center of a football field, the electrons would be small tennis balls orbiting in the most distant stands. Between the nucleus and the electrons, what exists? Space, emptiness, nothing tangible. This means that the table where you rest your arms is, for the most part, empty space. The body you consider so solid is, proportionally, more empty than filled. The experience of solidity, that resistance you feel when touching surfaces, doesn't come from matter meeting matter. It comes from electromagnetic fields repelling each other. It's a trick of the senses, which interpret energetic interactions as physical contact between solid substances. But the deconstruction doesn't stop at the atom. Deepen the observation beyond the electron, and you find even smaller particles, quarks. And when physics tries to identify what makes up quarks, it finds only fluctuating energy, waves, vibrations, no solid thing anywhere. Matter, in its most fundamental essence, isn't matter. It's energy organizing itself into specific patterns that the human senses interpret as solid forms. The chair isn't made of substance, it's made of energy vibrating at a particular frequency that your brain decodes as chair. The body isn't a block of flesh, it's an extremely complex energy field that perception translates as physical form. If the physical world is essentially composed of energy, and if energy is malleable, then the apparent rigidity of external circumstances is less definitive than it seems. The negative bank account, the unfavorable diagnosis, the situation of loneliness, all these conditions that seem so solid and immovable are, ultimately, energetic configurations. And configurations can be reconfigured. Neville anticipated this understanding decades before quantum physics popularized such concepts. He taught that the visible world is merely a projection, the visible form of internal states of consciousness. Science now offers a technical language to describe the same phenomenon. What we call physical reality is energetic information being translated by perception. The closest analogy in contemporary experience comes from technology. Think about how a movie or video game is generated. On the screen, you see landscapes, characters, and apparently three-dimensional objects. But behind this image exists only code, sequences of zeros and ones that the processor translates into a visual experience. The landscape doesn't exist the way it seems to exist. It's a projection based on underlying information. The physical world operates in a similar way. The forms you perceive, including your own body and all the circumstances of your life, are three-dimensional projections of energetic patterns that exist at a more fundamental level. The computer's binary code has its equivalent in the energetic vibration that constitutes the basis of all matter. Change the code, and the projection changes. Change the energetic pattern, through the change of consciousness state, and material reality reconfigures itself. The world that the senses present as fixed and definitive is, in reality, fluid and responsive. Solidity is an interpretation, not an absolute fact. The permanence of circumstances is an illusion generated by the consistency of observation. As long as you keep looking the same way, the projection stays the same. If matter is organized energy, and if this organization can be altered, what is the mechanism that governs this reorganization? How exactly does an energetic pattern in the fourth dimension translate into concrete experience in the third dimension? The answer involves understanding the crystallization process, the moment when invisible potential crosses the threshold and becomes a tangible reality. If matter is organized energy, then the process of transforming your life consists of reorganizing this energy. But how does this happen in practice? The mechanism requires understanding what occurs in the fourth dimension, this field where all possibilities coexist, and how a specific potential crosses the threshold between the invisible and the tangible. In the fourth dimension, reality behaves like an ocean of infinite possibilities. Unlike the third dimension, where time segments are experienced into past, present, and future, in the fourth dimension, these divisions don't exist. Everything happens simultaneously. The version of you that is in debt and the version of you that is financially free exist now. The sick version and the healthy version coexist at this moment. The lonely version and the version in a fulfilling relationship occupy the same field of potential, not as fantasies or abstract possibilities, as complete energetic realities waiting for attunement. Neville calls this finished creation. The concept is precise. Everything that could exist already exists. There's nothing to be created. There are only states to be selected and inhabited. When you desire something, whether physical healing, financial abundance, or emotional connection, this desire doesn't arise from a void. It emerges because you're picking up, even if faintly, the existence of a reality where this desire is already fulfilled. The longing is the signal. The persistent want for something different indicates that this something different already exists somewhere in the field. The manifestation process, therefore, doesn't consist of fabricating a reality from nothing. It consists of transposing a potential that already exists in the fourth dimension into the sensory experience of the third dimension. The operational question isn't, how do I create what I want? But rather, how do I align with what already exists? Quantum physics offers a valuable clue through the behavior of subatomic particles. At the quantum level, matter exists in a state of superposition. A particle can be in multiple states simultaneously until it's observed. The act of observation collapses the superposition and forces the particle to assume a defined state. Before observation, possibilities. After observation, concrete reality. This principle operates similarly in the relationship between the fourth and third dimensions. As long as you don't direct your attention, your internal observation, to a specific possibility, all of them remain in a state of potential. The moment you consistently focus on one of them, assume the feeling that it's already real, and sustain this position regardless of contrary evidence, the collapse process begins. The potential starts to crystallize into material experience. Neville describes this mechanism clearly. Assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the act that selects, from among infinite possibilities, the one you want to experience. This isn't about wishing, hoping, or visualizing as a distant spectator. It's about internally inhabiting the final state, living in the imagination, as if the result were already an accomplished fact. The central difficulty is obvious. How do you embrace an invisible potential while you're dealing with very concrete problems? The electric bill arrived. The doctor presented a concerning diagnosis. The phone isn't ringing with the invitation you expected. The senses are bombarding you with evidence that the desired reality isn't present. And the natural tendency is to give in to this bombardment, validate the absence, and conclude that the desire remains distant. Here lies the turning point. The recognition that the healed, prosperous, or loved version of you already exists, right now, as a complete energetic pattern in the fourth dimension allows for a decisive mental maneuver. You can shift your attention from material absence, which is the apparent problem, to energetic presence, which is the real solution. The absence that the senses register doesn't mean the desired reality doesn't exist. It only means it hasn't yet expressed itself materially. The difference between these two interpretations is the difference between remaining stuck and initiating transformation. Think of a photograph being developed in an old darkroom. The image is already on the film. It was captured at the moment of the click. But while the film remains in the camera, you see nothing. A development process is needed for the latent image to become visible. The absence of a visible image doesn't mean the absence of an image. It means the development process hasn't occurred yet. The fourth dimension works like the exposed film. The image, your transformed life, is already there, captured in the field of potential. The third dimension is the photographic paper where the image is developed. The development process is the consistent sustaining of the internal state corresponding to the desired result. When you assume, "I am healthy now," not as an empty affirmation, but as a genuine internal posture, you're initiating the development. The latent image begins to become visible. What makes this process challenging is the apparent contradiction between what you feel internally and what you observe externally. The symptoms are still there. The bank balance hasn't changed. The loneliness persists. Neville instructs that this phase is the test. The senses will present contrary evidence precisely to verify whether you'll maintain the new position or abandon it in favor of the old one. Every time you validate sensory evidence as the final truth, you interrupt the crystallization process and restart the previous pattern. The practical instruction is straightforward. Maintain the internal state regardless of external circumstances. This doesn't mean ignoring reality in the sense of irresponsibility. You continue paying bills, consulting doctors, and acting in the world. But your internal identity, your sense of who you are, remains anchored in the final state, not the current state. You act in the present while inhabiting the future. This dual occupation, body in the third dimension, consciousness in the fourth, is what accelerates crystallization. Energy follows attention. Sustained attention on the desired state functions like a magnet that attracts to the third dimension the elements necessary to materialize what already exists in the fourth. This process doesn't operate by magic in the sense of violating natural laws. It operates through these laws. Energetic reorganization precedes material reorganization, and consciousness is the instrument of this reorganization. The theoretical understanding that energy follows attention now requires a practical translation. How do you apply this principle when facing real problems, accumulated debts, concerning diagnoses, and failed relationships? The answer involves a radical change in how we deal with challenges, and this change contradicts almost everything we've been taught about problem solving. The conventional method says, identify the problem, analyze its causes, develop strategies to combat it, and execute the necessary actions. It seems logical, it seems responsible, and yet it frequently fails, or produces temporary results that soon reverse. Why? Because the very act of focusing on the problem energetically feeds the continuation of that problem. Observe the mechanism carefully. When you wake up thinking about debt, mentally review the numbers, calculate how much is left to pay off, and feel the pressure in your chest. What are you doing in energetic terms? You're directing all your attention to the frequency of scarcity. You're inhabiting, with emotional intensity, the state of being in debt. And since the third dimension reflects the content of consciousness, this sustained inhabitation produces more circumstances that justify the state of indebtedness. Unexpected expenses arise. income opportunities slip away. The cycle perpetuates itself. The same applies to health. The person who receives an unfavorable diagnosis and starts organizing their entire life around the illness, researching symptoms, talking about the problem, identifying themselves as someone who is sick, is inadvertently anchoring their consciousness in the state they want to overcome. Obsessive attention to the problem functions like water and fertilizer for a plant you want to see grow. Neville proposes a complete inversion of this approach. Instead of trying to solve the problem by attacking it directly, the instruction is to assume the identity of the final solution before it physically manifests. The movement isn't from problem to solution through gradual effort. The movement is from the solution backward. You first occupy the resolved state and allow reality to reorganize to match this occupation. In practice, this means sustaining internally the conviction, I am healthy now, even while the body presents contrary symptoms. It means inhabiting the state of prosperity while bills still accumulate. It means feeling loved and complete while the desired relationship hasn't yet materialized. This posture isn't delusion. It's a deliberate choice about which reality will receive your attention, your energy, and your validation. When you consistently assume the final state, something begins to change, not just internally, but in the way external reality organizes itself around you. Neville describes this as the law of reversibility. If a physical state produces a corresponding emotional state, health produces a feeling of well-being, then the reverse is also true. Sustaining the feeling of well-being produces conditions of health. The change in internal state isn't passive. It opens channels that previously remained invisible. Ideas arise seemingly out of nowhere. You discover a treatment protocol you didn't know about. You find a professional who approaches the problem differently. You receive casual information that completely changes your perspective. Income opportunities appear in unexpected places. A person enters your life at the exact right moment. These events are usually classified as coincidences. But coincidence is just the name we give to connections whose cause we can't trace with linear logic. When you alter your internal state, you alter your tuning, and a different tuning picks up different signals. The signals were already there, transmitting all along. You simply couldn't pick them up while your receiver was calibrated to the frequency of the problem. The crucial point is understanding that action doesn't disappear from this process. You don't sit at home repeating, I am prosperous, while ignoring practical responsibilities. Actions continue to be necessary, but their nature changes. Instead of desperate actions born from fear and scarcity, inspired actions born from internal certainty arise. The person who acts from a state of health makes different decisions than the person who acts from a state of illness. The person who operates from prosperity makes different choices than the one who operates from financial panic. Neville teaches that disciplined imagination, the ability to sustain an internal state regardless of circumstances, functions as a mold for physical reality. The mold precedes the form. First, you establish the pattern in the fourth dimension. Then the third dimension adjusts to fill it. Trying to create the form without first establishing the mold is like trying to make ice by pouring water into the air. Without the container that gives it shape, the water simply scatters. The operational instruction is direct. Stop trying to solve problems. Start inhabiting solutions. Identify the final state you desire, not the specific circumstances, but the internal feeling those circumstances would produce, and start living from that state now. Do this not as a 5-minute daily exercise, but as a continuous posture. Every time the mind returns to the problem, gently redirect it to the solution already achieved. You don't manifest by solving the problem, you manifest by vibrating in the solution. And when you consistently vibrate in the solution, material reality has no choice but to reorganize to reflect that vibration. This is the mechanism, and when understood, it reveals why so many people remain stuck in the same cycles and how to escape them for good. Most people live trapped in a repetitive cycle without realizing it. The faces change, the settings vary, the years pass, but the patterns remain the same. Financial problems that resolve and reappear. Relationships that start with promise and end the same way. Health issues that improve temporarily and return. It's like living inside the movie Groundhog Day, waking up every day to variations of the same reality, unable to escape the loop. Why does this happen? Because the person keeps observing and reacting to their current reality, what the senses present as what is, without understanding that this current reality is merely the residue of past thoughts and attention. What you see today isn't today's creation. It's the materialized projection of states of consciousness you inhabited yesterday, last week, over the last few years. The third dimension operates on a delay. It displays the movie that was recorded before, not the one being recorded now. The fourth dimension, on the other hand, continuously projects itself into the third. The flow is constant. Consciousness feeds the fourth dimension, and the fourth dimension projects the third. This process never stops. At every moment, your attention is selecting patterns in the field of potential, and these patterns are organizing themselves to become your future experience. The problem is that most people, when they wake up and observe their current reality, automatically react to it. And by reacting, they reaffirm the same patterns that created this reality in the first place. It's a self-feeding cycle. You observe scarcity, feel scarcity, think about scarcity, and this sustained attention on scarcity programs more scarcity for the future. When this new scarcity materializes, you observe it again, react again, and the cycle continues. There's no external villain. There's no mysterious force working against you. There's only a mechanism operating exactly as it was designed to operate, and you, unknowingly, are triggering this mechanism repeatedly in the unwanted direction. Hacking reality requires interrupting this cycle, and the interruption happens through a specific discipline, withdrawing the senses from what is and depositing them in what could be, which, as already established, energetically already is. This maneuver is the leverage point. It's where the power of transformation resides. This doesn't mean denying reality in the sense of pretending problems don't exist. It means consciously choosing which reality will receive your attention, your energy, and your validation. The overdue bills exist on the sensory plane. You don't need to pretend they don't exist. But you can choose not to make them the center of your identity. You can acknowledge the situation and still anchor your consciousness in the state of prosperity. The difference is subtle in words, but monumental in effects. Neville instructs us to withdraw sensory validation from the external world. The eyes will continue seeing what they see. The ears will continue hearing what they hear. But the validation, the act of saying, "This is the final truth about me and my life," that you control. And when you withdraw this validation from the external world and deposit it in the internal vision, something fundamental changes in the equation. To alter the projection we call physical life, you need to alter the source of the transmission. The source isn't in external circumstances, it's in your attention in the fourth dimension. That's where the signal originates. That's where the pattern is selected. External circumstances are the screen where the movie appears, not the projector that generates the movie. Messing with the screen changes nothing. Messing with the projector changes everything. The act of assuming that the desired result is already real in the energetic field, regardless of the contrary evidence that the sense is present, is the mechanism that accelerates materialization. When you sustain this position with consistency, you're effectively reprogramming the transmission. You're selecting a different pattern in the field of potential. And this different pattern, fed by your attention, inevitably begins to project itself into the third dimension. This is what allows quantum leaps in life experience. Not gradual and incremental improvements, but transformations that seem disproportionate to the visible effort. People who go from paralyzing debt to abundance in short periods, health recoveries that defy medical prognoses, relationships that appear exactly when the person stops searching and starts inhabiting the state of completeness. These leaps aren't miracles in the sense of exceptions to natural laws. They're demonstrations of what happens when someone finally aligns the source of transmission with the desired result. The common denominator in all these cases is the same. The person stopped reacting to what is and started living from what will be, understanding that, in the fourth dimension, this will be already is. The change in verb tense isn't just semantics, it's the difference between perpetuating the past and creating the future. All change begins with understanding your role as a co-creator, and the only way to connect with this greater intelligence is through meditation. We've developed a set of audio tools to help you access this higher state of consciousness. To learn more and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments, "It made sense to me."